Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, July 10th, 2024. Time for the mute button to let go and let me begin the show. Okay. Well, our day 2 on our new sound setup. So far, so good. And, well, it did necessitate a little bit of additional learning yesterday in the way we would edit the show. But I think we got it all down now. And I think we have the levels nearing the places that they ought to be. I might play around with them a little bit more and boost some things and reduce others. And I set them to where they were before, but the new sound system, new setup, plays havoc with these things. But so do, hurricanes, which made landfall in the United States. And we have probably some stories on that one. I wonder if that's what I did see a note from Justice saying, I must have missed. Sometimes I'm not certain which stories you're talking about. Abbott was out of state and missed the call. Was that about the hurricane? Was he in fact absent during hurricane response, or did he miss the call for something else? What else could possibly be going on in Texas, right? Anyway, many other things to catch up on. It is Wednesday. Greg Dworkin returns, and he's got a raft of stories to deal with. It is that point in the week. Remember that when we spoke on Monday, we figured, well, this will be the week where if something's going to happen with respect to who's going to be on the presidential ticket and in what positions for the Democratic Party come November, this week will determine that we'll either see a change or we will not, barring, of course, some unforeseen events in between. But it's now Wednesday, and it's now starting to shape up like, no, the whole process that we went through to determine who the nominee was going to be is going to be the process we're going to go forward with after all. And get used to it, and, well, it's time. Okay, so we are getting used to it, and I don't know, we'll check in with Greg. I think he's getting used to it, too. I see the abbreviated pundit roundup headline seems to speak to that as well. So we'll check in with him, and he'll give it to you straight from the horse's mouth. The horse is in Connecticut, so we got that to look forward to. Lots of other things to round up, things we didn't get to yesterday that will be of interest. A lot more Project 2025 coverage happening. People absolutely still getting. What were we doing? Oh, getting the word out and receiving the word as well. And it's just sort of interesting watching it be covered and reaching new audiences. I saw it interestingly referred to. I think we actually covered this a while ago, that Trump has for some time, independent of Project 2025 or any of the other stupid projects, and there are several of them out there that have their own stupid names, that he's been saying this, his whole candidacy. He's been very open about the fact that his whole candidacy is geared toward revenge. He uses the words revenge and retribution very frequently, and tells people at rallies, I am your retribution. And we've asked in the past, retribution and revenge exactly for what? I mean, I'm just kind of curious. It's interesting to stop and ask yourself that question. Revenge. He's free. He's a convicted felon, but walking around free. They keep delaying his everything, including his sentencing for cases where he's already been convicted. He's now looking to have those convictions thrown out. He's walking around with a Supreme Court presidential immunity ruling in his pocket. He's largely gotten away with everything that he's done. Even the few things that he's been charged with and convicted of are minor compared to the things that he's actually done and should be charged with, or may never face courtroom proceedings about. And to the extent that anybody's been punished, it's been people that he lured to Washington, D.C. on January 6th and who did incredibly stupid and dangerous things on their own. But he's been punished in almost no way at all. He got away with almost all the things that he actually attempted to do while president. Most of the things were just pipe dreams, and he didn't bother putting any effort into them because he's Donald Trump. He doesn't put effort into things. But he got to do and say whatever the hell he wanted for 4 years, played golf, raked in money, still continues to rake in money hand over fist. I'm not sure what he needs revenge for, but of course, I guess the revenge is for the few people who actually faced, that law and order thing that Republicans say is their goal, and there are precious few of them. But mostly, I guess it's revenge for the imagined slights of the past 4 to 8 years, and I guess they still are out there rallying for, we need revenge against the litter boxes that weren't in schools, the children who weren't held captive in the non-existent basement of Comet Pizza, the cement milkshakes that weren't thrown at cops by Antifa, the cities that weren't burned to the ground. We've got to have revenge for all those things, I guess, because I heard about them and something, and I haven't investigated to find out whether they're true, so they must be true because I still remember them happening. All right. Well, we got to watch out for that, obviously, and every day will be a struggle to remember in the face of other atrocities and other things that are going wrong and other things that we need to fix inside of our own party and other things that the Supreme Court is ruining, to keep the focus on this cannot be. We certainly can't roll out the red carpet and permit this to happen. It may happen over our objections, but come November, at some point between now and November, whether by mail, in person, absentee ballot delivered by some other thing, I don't know, Uber votes perhaps will be developed by then. Make your appointment now to register your objection. Greg Dworkin is here, and if I don't let him speak, he'll register an objection. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Hey, good morning. So, keep talking.
Okay.
And your
yes.
soundboard can, do all sorts of marvelous things now.
I think so. I hope it's
it
like
can weed out the Biden
things.
Should run from the Biden shouldn't run. So
yes.
That, when we wind up playing the show later, we'll see where the soundboard decided it was going to fall.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's getting to be late in the week, but there's still action going on. Congress
here's today's headline
here.
in the Danbury News Times.
Okay.
Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont hedges in his support for Biden. That's basically it.
They love hedges in Connecticut.
Let me give you a quick summary of what's been going on the last couple of days since the last show. Okay?
The last show you're aware of.
The last show I was on.
That's the one. We had another one in between.
Right. Nicholas Grossman writes, Representatives Ilhan Omar, Cori Bush, AOC have all put out strong Biden is the nominee, everybody support him statements. The leftmost part of the Democratic Party, fighting to keep him as the rightmost part, that is to say centrist, push for him to drop out was not on many political bingo cards. Observer Sean Rose notes on Twitter, he's delivered a lot for progressives. They know it. I also think they're realistic about the alternative's chance of winning. That's their opinion, whether that's true or not. But Edward Isaac Dovere notes that Pelosi was just on Morning Joe, and her comment was, and I quote, it's up to the president to decide if he's going to run. We're all encouraging him to make that decision because time is running short. So Edward Isaac Dovere heard that and said, look, Biden sent a letter to House Democrats 2 days ago saying his mind is made up and he wants the questioning to end. He says he's made a decision. Pelosi and others are going on TV saying they're waiting for him to decide. That's a statement.
Yes.
They're trying to nudge him, wink, wink, into, quote, doing the right thing, which in their opinion, he hasn't done yet.
I see.
Meanwhile, last night, Michael Bennet, senator from Colorado, Democrat.
Right.
Centrist. Democratic Senator Michael Bennet, I just think this race is on a trajectory that's very worrisome. Trump is on track, I think, to win this election and maybe win it by a landslide and take with him the Senate and the House. Message to his fellow electeds.
Okay.
Get off the pot and do more.
Yeah, I don't know about a landslide, but...
the polling ain't great. We'll get to that. Biden literally sent a letter to House Democrats 2 days ago that said, F off, I'm running, get on board.
I see.
And Pelosi's statement is a shot across the bow. It feels like they want him either out or running a very different, more active and engaged public campaign as soon as possible.
Okay.
So the point is, at the beginning of the week, we didn't know what was going to happen when Congress got back. Congress got back, and behind closed doors, they said, this is terrible. I'm looking at the polling. It's awful. We're doomed if he stays in. He has to get out. And publicly, we support whoever the nominee is, whoever that is. And whoever it is, we're behind him. Or her,
okay. Until they find out that the polling is bad, or just always?
They found out the polling was bad.
Yeah.
Because, again, unity is great, but self-preservation tops everything in Congress. Always has, always will. Can't expect anything less than that.
That seems likely true.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
feels
right. Jake Sherman said that statement from Pelosi's earth-shaking, hardly an endorsement of Biden from Congress's most prominent Democrat. She may not be the most powerful Democrat in Congress anymore, but she's certainly the most prominent.
Okay, I'll believe that.
So
when I see it, I just saw it.
How is it still going? Well, again, it's not end of week; it's only midweek.
Right.
But
for Congress,
Congress does not want Biden to run.
It's weekend. All right.
You know who wants Biden to run? Congressional Black Caucus, Congressional Hispanic Caucus. A lot of people who lean left on the pundit roundup. I'm looking at the comments on Daily Kos. Most people there want him to run. The problem is the polling. It's not a question of whether Biden should run or not. It's whether Biden can win or not. And that's what all of the electeds are weighing in their head. It's also an age thing. The younger you are, the less enamored you are with Biden. You don't like boomers anyway.
Yeah, right. Okay, boomer.
But then this stuff comes up.
Yeah, although I mean, it has to be. It is an age thing. I mean, there's no polling saying anybody else would be winning. Is there?
Well, Harris would do okay.
Would do okay,
and we'll go over that polling. In fact, let's start doing the polling now. So, while all of this is happening, Nate Cohen writes in, says, I'm on vacation, but I have to write this in because it's so important.
I don't know.
Pew released their gigantic, ginormous National Public Opinion Reference Survey, NPORS.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And Nate Cohen writes, perhaps the most important poll you've never heard of came out today.
Right.
The Pew NPORS study, a large mail survey with financial incentives and a 30% response rate.
Okay.
So they get people to respond.
Yeah, with money. Interesting.
I'll add in at the end to give you a foreshadowing G. Elliott Morris's observations about why we don't know anything. But it's important enough, Nate Cohen said, that I had to open it up when the email arrived. The survey is important because it's used as a benchmark. Its results are used as targets for weighting by other polls. Pew uses it to weight their own surveys. Other polls like CNN, Kaiser Family Foundation, Ipsos, they all do.
Okay, that is important sounding.
Nate Cohen says, we don't use it here at the New York Times, but I do compare it to New York Times Siena data to see where we're at. The headline, NPORS found leaned party identification as R+1. That's the first time it gives the GOP a party ID edge. Last year it was D+2. Now that's significant in its own right, given the quality of the survey, but it'll affect other polls. In other words, if you're going to do weighting, WEIGHTING, not waiting for the poll, but weighting the poll,
right?
So that you get the right number of Republicans and Democrats to make sense of the raw data that you got. It'll change results if you think that the universe of voters in the United States leans Republican. It's one thing to say it leans Republican. That's bad enough. But it's going to affect all the other surveys that you do.
Yes, okay. We'll start to see worse polling.
So you're going to start to see worse polls for Biden. By subgroup, the headline is age, NPORS, and this is the startling thing. It found the GOP ahead on leaned party ID among 18 to 29-year-olds, even though the sample was Biden plus 20 on recall mode.
What? Why? Where? What? Who?
Yeah, exactly. This is what Michael Bennett and the others are reacting to. The sample size is fairly large, and it hasn't shown anything like that in previous cycles. There were fewer shifts by race, though the Democratic share of major party-leaning non-white voters kept edging downward. They did show a GOP edge among registered non-voters. That doesn't matter. They're not voting. The results overall and by subgroup RVs come very close to a compilation of what New York Times Siena polls find. So they have a different methodology but came to the same results.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Democratic share of partisan identifiers, including leaners, white college. Democrats get 53% of that vote. White college, no degree. White, no degree in college.
Okay, yeah.
33%. It's a terrible number. Okay. All registered voters, Democrats get 49%. Black voters, 85%. That's consistent with what you might expect. Hispanics, 60%. 18 to 29s, only 46%. The 30 to 44-year-olds were more Democratic, 51%, in the survey than the 18 to 29-year-olds.
I think I've lost.
And so were the 65 and olders. They were at 50. So you look at this and you go, wait a minute, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And they don't know. It's just notable that this is happening. So Matt Blackwell, who is an associate professor at Harvard of political sciences, who does polling and research. And basically, the age bracket of 18 to 29-year-olds are R+7 among registered voters. Just these are astounding numbers.
Yes.
The question is, can you believe them? And that's really part of the issue, and that gets back to the issue with polling. So G. Elliott Morris is looking at these NPOR Pew survey results, as well as some other results I'll go over in a minute. And G. Elliott Morris says, look, there's three possibilities here. One, there's a lot of sample noise. It happens, but with a 30% response rate, that's not likely.
All right.
Two, we're seeing a historic realignment among young voters to the point where they're just as GOP as the silent generation and white evangelical Christians.
That seems unlikely, too.
I have a hard time believing that, but could be.
But yeah,
and then his third possibility, which I think is the most likely, but you hate to hang your hat on it. Selection into taking a poll is correlated with some unmeasured, very political variable that's throwing off all these polls, even the best in the industry. So, we have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, I mean,
you look at it and you say, oh, it's probably that, but boy, do you really want to hang your entire who should run on that?
Right. The likelihood that that they would, I don't know what. Are we saying young activist Republicans like Charlie Kirk has successfully organized people to answer?
Yeah, whereas
NPO.
People on the other side are so discouraged by what they saw, they had doubts about Biden in the first place. That's what I hear from my son's contemporaries. He's 30.
I mean,
I don't want Biden to run. I never wanted Biden to run. I saw that debate, and oh my God, he has to get out. That's universally what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and I could believe it from I could believe from the Democratic side that younger voters are discouraged and are on their own, turning away.
Ruined everything, and now they're ruining this. That is what I'm hearing.
Versus, the idea that no, actually, Republicans successfully organized the youth vote. I successfully organized anything? No, probably not. Not Charlie Kirk.
I'm saying something's going on. Yeah. I'm also saying we don't quite know what it is. And G. Elliott Morris says, don't stick your head in the sand and pretend the polls are totally accurate and we know what's going on. We don't. Okay. On the other hand, we got this data, and
we asked people, and this is what we got.
The same thing.
Yeah, you asked, we got this. You have to do something with it.
Right.
But yeah, this is where it all could go off the rails. And if they say, well, these are the results, and you can't just, use the feels to say, forget the results, we're going to weight things differently, and that's going to essentially skew it does skew the polls. It's going to skew the polls. It may be correct, it may not be correct, but this is what we use to drive how we fine tune what we get out of the polls, and it's going to skew it Republican. And it may be that it's just, all right, well, so it's another year where the Republicans run around saying red wave, and then it doesn't show up and everybody laughs at them. But what a nail biter that will be. Okay.
Yeah. Or
right. Yeah, they could be right. That'd be interesting.
That would be.
Well,
and not
horrific.
In a good way interesting.
Yes, but it would be, purely from the polling world view of things, it would be interesting for them to, after all of these, 3 cycles of disaster, say, aha, we got it right.
We got it right this time.
Yeah.
Yep. So this is, with all of that, so with all those caveats about polling, this is the Cook Political Report polling average that they just came out with today. and it's an aggregate. But interesting because they break down some of the subgroups. So up until this point, basically either Biden and Trump were tied in their average, which is where it's been since beginning of June. Biden was slightly ahead up until June 27th, and now Trump's ahead by 2 points. So that's the biggest swing they've had in their poll the entire year.
I see.
And this is post-debate. Overall, Trump is 46.9, Biden 44.3, men 53.39 Trump, women 49.9, 42.8% Biden. And again, you look at that and say, why aren't women more strongly toward Biden?
Yeah.
And my answer is, well, the debate. I mean, you saw it, and you maybe think that it wasn't the disaster everybody set you up to believe.
Well, it was quite a setup, so it was really hard to live up to that.
White college has Biden ahead 53-42. White non-college has Trump ahead 64-32. There's a lot of white non-college folks in this electorate. Black 71-20, which is lower than the Pew survey had. Hispanic way lower. Biden 47.7 and Trump 41.4. In the 18 to 29-year-olds, they still have Biden ahead, 46.4, 41.2. But again, this is an aggregate of polls. If those polls went back and reweighted everything based on the Pew survey,
right,
these numbers would change in favor of the Republicans. So what I'm saying is, even without making those adjustments, Biden's already losing. If you go back and make those adjustments, he winds up losing more. This is driving Nancy Pelosi, Michael Bennet, and the other Democrats like Ned Lamont locally to hedge their bets and say, I don't know. Yeah, Biden said, I've already decided. You told me to decide. I decided. And they're saying to Biden, yeah, well, what you really need to do is decide.
Decide differently.
Yes.
Yeah.
But they're not saying the differently out loud.
Right. But he's...
All right, and then the worst number here for me in this aggregate from Cook Political, independents, 46-40 Trump. You can't win an election if you're not winning independents.
I don't.
And you're not even winning Democrats as much as the Republicans are winning Republicans. So this is bad, and you have to deal with it.
I guess
that doesn't mean it's going to be the final result. Again,
no,
Mars is right.
Not.
Polls could just be wrong.
Right.
And there's a lot to happen. And yes, as you pointed out, there's a lot that's going on with Project 2025 that's making its way there. Dobbs is still salient. All that stuff's true. But nobody's focusing on that. They're still focusing on like what's going on with the Democrats.
Yeah. All right. Well, tomorrow will be Thursday. Will they be done by then? Will it all be over?
I hope so.
All right. Excellent.
But, we may wind up going, and again, what's going to happen? It's Harris if it's not Biden. This is a way to win poll, which is done by Change Research. 2,074 Democratic leaning independents and pure independents. And these are likely voters in Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, North Carolina, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin.
All right.
The poll was done July 4th and 5th.
Who answers a July 4th poll? Come on now.
So
is it bad?
Post-debate.
All right.
Okay. The polling shows there's much work for the ticket to do to consolidate Democratic and independent battleground voters. Biden starts out at 75%, Harris at 76%.
Okay.
After short positive and negative bios, Harris' support goes to 79%. Among the key Democrat and independent battleground voters, we found the following top-line deltas for the VP relative to Biden. 18 to 34-year-olds, Harris is +5. 35 to 49-year-olds, Harris is +6. 50 to 64-year-olds, the most conservative cohort in most of these demographic breakdowns, Harris is -1. And 65 plus, Harris is -4. So the kids like her, the oldies, not so much.
Well, you're not going to get them on the too old thing. So.
Pure indies, +6 for Harris. Double doubters, +12 for Harris.
Double doubters now. Okay.
Yeah. Double haters, double doubters, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah. Clean that
Maybe
up.
voters, I'm not sure if I'm going to vote or not. Harris is plus 12 over Biden.
All right. I mean, you say so. You did answer. If you're a maybe voter, I don't know what to do with you, but okay.
Maybe that's what I think.
Yeah, maybe I'm lying.
Maybe I'm right.
Okay.
Whites, 18 to 49-year-olds, Harris is plus 7. Black, 18 to 49-year-olds, Harris is plus 5. Latino, 18 to 49s, Harris is plus 7. Okay. If Biden steps aside, do you support Harris? Democrats plus independents, 67% support, 24% opposed. Democrats alone, 71-21.
Huh.
Black 70-20, Latino 70-18, white 67-25, 18 to 34-year-olds 72-22, 65 plus 69-22. If it comes to that, the Democrats will rally around her.
Yes.
They don't want an open contest. They're only in the 60s on that. So this is obviously a very strong pro-Harris poll. For all I know, Harris's office commissioned it. I don't know that.
Hey, why not?
It's out there for discussion, and the reason I bring it up is that it's not automatic to me. Well, why would they go with Harris? Harris will lose.
Okay.
I don't know that. You don't know that. Nobody knows that. Nobody knows nothing.
It's certainly a better, more sensible alternative than the things that were being floated earlier last week, et cetera. We'll have a snap nationwide primary contest of some kind. Well, no. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't put anybody at ease. It's probably not workable. But at least they're down to measuring. So
the
Harris.
way that the pollsters put it is, sensible. Look, let's look at it this way. Can we unite around Harris if it comes to that? The answer is yes. Will we? Okay. We can't answer that. Polls are not there for that.
We would. Well, that's the feels part. I think we all understand that. But okay. Yeah, all right. I guess my initial question was, they have some mystery candidate out there who they think is polling in the 80s? No. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Ed Roots Radio. I've just seen a great bumper sticker has just come across the. It's not political either, but I don't know. I'm going to read it to you.
Somebody just drove into your living room?
Yes,
I'm sorry to hear that.
Right. Well, it's a public thoroughfare. I invite all comers into the house. But those "How am I driving?" "How's my driving?" stickers is modeled after this one, and it says "How am I driving?" Actually, and then it says, "How does an engine even work? How can a living God cause such agony?" Is another one, but that's interesting. You got to get pretty close to read this one. But I like that. How am I driving? How does an engine even work? Oh, I see. You've gone a different direction with that one. All right, well, that's a bumper sticker to go out and get.
Yeah, the thing is, you do not want to see that on like a large 18-wheeler.
Yeah, right. Okay, well, this appears to be just your...
A semi, a lorry, whatever you call it. You don't want to see it on one of those big things.
Yes, this appears to be just your regular commuting sedan. But okay, well done. Good sticker. Hope you make $1 million with it.
All right. So here's a little bit
Yeah.
more of a flipping piece. This is from Brian Beutler.
Oh.
What a Biden turnaround might look like, assuming he does stay.
All right.
And they go into how
He
Trump won in
wins, and it's
2016.
awesome.
You know, lying, cheating, stealing, but getting people engaged in a way that was enough to get enough, votes. And so he goes over that and says, but here's the good news. Biden can't replicate all of what Trump did, like paying hush money. And to the extent that Trump broke the law and subverted democracy, we shouldn't want him to, but he can draw on the general lessons. In one regard, Democrats are already heeding those lessons. They've turned Project 2025, the unofficial but official Republican agenda for a second Trump term, into a viral sensation. They've done this successfully enough. It's broken through to the kinds of voters who don't pay close attention to political news, and they appear to be alarmed. Crucially, Democrats have managed to do this even though Biden himself is unable to detail and condemn its contents extemporaneously. But that's about what Trump might do if he returns to power. So what should Biden do? Well, it'd be nice if Kagan or Sotomayor stepped down so you can make the Supreme Court center. In other words, get a new justice before the election. But his best appeal remains the one I've been advocating since the oral argument in Dobbs almost 3 years ago. Return me to office with a Democratic Congress and I'll sign legislation restoring the right to abortion.
Okay.
He needs to center that. And I think it would make Congress happier with him if he did that too.
Okay.
I don't think he needs a laundry list of campaign promises, just one. Make it all about Dobbs. It would be analogous to Trump's short list of Supreme Court justices.
Okay.
Why is this election important? Dobbs. That's why.
Yeah, as the previous election was important that way.
Then Democrats need to have a plan to control discourse in October, not with bland cliches about kitchen table issues, but lurid, gasp-inducing, media-friendly revelations that remind people what makes Trump so unfit for office. Maybe do something with the Epstein files.
Okay.
Maybe evidence of Trump's diplomatic sabotage. Maybe they have other ideas. Either way, they need to knock Trump back on his heels a little bit. So the Obama administration, more certain than it should have, of Clinton's standing, essentially abandoned efforts to control the information environment in 2016. You can't do that. Biden is president and the White House can still do that. So basically what he says is, I still hope desperation gives way to ruthless pragmatism so that Democrats ultimately run a candidate who can prosecute the case against Trump every day. But desperation can also be the mother of creativity.
Okay.
So
we have some of the desperation.
There's some things that whoever the candidate is can do, and I think that's probably good.
Okay. If, to the extent that desperation is a necessary component, we're in luck.
Yeah, we got that.
We are the people to see when desperation is in short supply. Yeah, right. If we could generate electricity from hand-wringing, we'd be fine. And I think we could, actually, if we just work on that technology for a little bit. But, all right. But, what has been in short supply is meeting that desperation with action. And that's something that the Democratic consultancy class has always kind of been behind the curve on that. Because we're very anxious people.
Right.
So
speaking of very anxious people, we did cover this a little bit, but Julie K. Brown has a little bit more to say. Julie K. Brown is the Miami Herald reporter who broke a lot of the Epstein stuff.
Yes.
So I consider her to be the Epstein expert. People have been writing, how come media is not talking more about these Epstein files that were just released?
That is a good question.
And Julie K. Brown has said, this is old news. A lot of this stuff was released in January. The person making a lot of the charges about what Trump did or didn't do is unreliable and has exaggerated other parts of it. So we chose not to go with it because we don't think it's necessarily reliable, corroborating stuff. And somebody said today, it's been 8 days since over 300 pages of never-before-seen docs with evidence confirming Trump is a co-conspirator with Epstein in an underage sex trafficking scheme. Why is nobody covering it? And Julie K. Brown this morning said, that's false. The documents released last week provide no evidence Trump was a co-conspirator with Epstein, which is why no major media has reported it. Use your head, folks. If there was evidence in a file made public, trust me, the media would be all over it. She's already said She's run a series on it. She reported on all of this stuff in January. There's nothing new here. It's old information that's sort of re-released. And a lot of the stuff that was in what was released is the prosecutors badgering the witnesses, which is news, and that was a story in and of itself. But the Trump stuff, not so much.
Mm.
So the question is, the major media has never dived into the relationship between Trump and Epstein. Why not? And Julie K. Brown said, excuse me, they all did after my series ran. Lots of stories, documentaries, podcasts, too many links to list. Epstein's arrest and subsequent death were international stories. And yes, many of them uncovered new details about Epstein's connections to other people, Trump included. So we've done that. So there was a single civil lawsuit, she says, filed years ago by a woman who dropped the lawsuit. I've been told it was dropped because the allegations were false. I know of no other underage rape allegations against Trump. It's a myth that seems to have spread on the internet, and she's basically trying to say, folks, we don't know that this is true. Don't go there.
I wonder how myths about Trump being a child rapist circulated on the internet. That's crazy.
But that's why I haven't spent a whole lot of time on it.
Oh. You are.
If Julie K. Brown says, I take this seriously, I got new stuff, okay, fine. I'm all over it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we haven't spent much time on it here on the show. And it certainly, I mean, it did strike me as like, well, this does seem to be old news. Of course, you know, I'm not against repeating old news about Donald Trump when it's terrible news. But, yeah, I mean, I have seen people asking that question. How come we're not seeing more about this? And I saw the answers too. And it was like, yeah, although the fact that it's old news, sometimes old news gets new life. You repeat it again and it takes off. And the first time it just didn't. But I guess if it's not actually news, then, you know, or not actually real, then you don't really want to be mixed up in it, I suppose. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I'm not into throwing everything up against the wall and see what sticks like spaghetti. What I'd rather concentrate on is what's actual news, which is Project 2025. This is a new survey from Navigator Research.
That's old news too, but we love it.
New poll, opposition to Project 2025 grows as people learn more about the plan. After reading 19 proposed policies for Project 2025, opposition grows from 49% to 63%. While support for the plan declines from 31% to 24%. This is one of those, if we told you what was in it, would you like it? And the answer is absolutely no.
Oh, no. Not at all.
And that includes Republicans.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's got some pretty super unpopular things in it that you wonder, you know, even what people were thinking. But I guess they were just thinking no one's going to look. And
not enough people have heard about it. They also go into that, so that's important. But you know, there's other stuff in it as well. Over 4 in 5 Americans oppose an array of policies proposed in Project 25, such as allowing employers to stop paying hourly workers overtime. 4 in 5 oppose allowing the government to monitor people's pregnancies to potentially prosecute them if they miscarry.
That sounds unpopular.
Removing health care protections for people with pre-existing conditions, eliminating National Weather Service. Eliminating Head Start, ending preschool education for children of low-income families.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, let's eliminate that.
And Trump says he knows nothing about it, but Judd Legum had a list of some of the people who are listed as authors on Project 2025, but also had a role in the Trump administration.
Everybody.
So I'm going to read you a short list here because I think it's illustrative. Paul Dane, author. Who is he? Chief of Staff at the Office of Personnel Management.
Nobody.
Steve Groves, White House Assistant Special Counsel. These are all Project 2025 authors Trump says he knows nothing about, including what's on page 23, where it says clearly in the fine print that I don't agree with that. Jonathan Barry, Acting Assistant Secretary for Policy of the Department of Labor. Adam Kanyub, Deputy Associate Attorney General. You're getting the gist of it here. Dustin Carmack, Chief of Staff to the Director of National Intelligence. Brendan Carr, FCC Commissioner. Ben Carson, HUD Secretary. Spencer Chrétien, Associate Director of Presidential Personnel. Ken Cuccinelli, Acting Deputy Secretary for the Department of Homeland Security. Rick Dearborn, Deputy Chief of Staff for President Donald Trump. Diana Furchtgott Roth, Assistant Secretary of Education. Let's see if there's any other names here we can pick out that you would know. Bernard McNamee, Commissioner of Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Stephen Moore, Federal Reserve nominee. Peter Navarro, Deputy Assistant to the President.
He's in prison.
In jail. Right, exactly.
Come on.
Hans von Spakovsky.
Oh, he ought to be. You ought to be in prison. Yeah.
Advisory Commission on Election Integrity. Russ Vaught, of course, who's the main author, Director of the Office of Management and Budget. Paul Winfrey, Deputy Assistant to the President. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Easily 30 people here who had roles in the Trump administration. Mm-hmm. And he says, I have nothing to do with it. And come on. That's nonsense.
Yeah. I mean, it's in one sense, it's a defensible statement. He never had anything to do with policy, even when he was president. But yeah, I don't know who any of them are, coffee boys, et cetera, et cetera. To him, everybody's a coffee boy. And he just says, I don't know, I need an agenda if I'm going to be president. Write me an agenda. And all of you nerds do that stuff. And do I believe him when he says, I don't know who any of these people are? More or less. I mean, you would parade them in front of him and he might recognize them. Oh, yeah, you were the guy at the party who said, that level he recognizes.
Yeah, but it's also Mark Meadows, Stephen Miller, a bunch of other advisors, and Navarro, people who would absolutely positively recognize. Because how do you not recognize Navarro?
Right. He is the coffee boy. He brought me the coffee. You're the guy who brought me coffee and then you went to prison. Yep. I haven't had coffee since you went. I mean, he's completely connected to all of them. In the only defensible version of his statement is he's addled and he doesn't really know who's writing what, but he knows that when he turns to somebody and says, I need some kind of a policy thing, these are the faces he sees when he turns and asks, and these are the people who carry the things in. So whatever these, low-level coffee boys' names are, that I don't know, but every time I need a policy, they're the ones that bring it, and I sign it and I show it to the press.
Right.
But now I don't know who they are.
Must read of the day on Axios, says Josh Krausauer. Former President Trump's adjusting his agenda, the GOP platform, his vice presidential plans, even his debate style to win over more than half a dozen persuadable voter groups in 7 states. So Trump is trying to pretend to be a moderate. One of the ways he does that is to stay off the air so nobody sees him.
Yeah, he's been kind of missing from the scene somehow. People are starting to speculate.
He's letting the Democrats fight among themselves.
Yeah,
that's Susie Wilde's a smart political maneuvers by his campaign staff. And, and then he tells the Republican National Committee, when you're doing your platform for the convention that's coming up, make sure you don't have pro-life in there because it looks bad.
Yeah. Right. Don't say anything.
And I don't really care if people are upset about it. I need to sell this to the suburbs.
Yeah. I mean, it's an approach. It's
a lie, but, it's new tone.
Yeah.
Oh, this is when he finally becomes presidential stuff,
Yeah, I guess so. Right. Which is why, of course, suggestions from people like Brian Boyler, that should be the main focus of the Democratic campaign, is to tell everybody no. They're going to try to duck it. They're going to pretend they're moderating. They're not moderating. And it's down to the level of just don't say this, and this in the platform. I'll give it to you. Just don't say it in the platform. I see. All right. Well, that'll take some convincing. And independents will be slow to move on that, but okay. It's a thought that's a very Trumpy thing to do. It's the first attention he's ever paid to a platform.
Right.
Very interesting.
So one of the stories that was garbage that got picked up is that there was this neurologist who went to the White House.
Yes.
Therefore, Biden must have Parkinson's.
Right. A neurologist walks into a bar.
Yeah.
And
for the 50th time.
Yeah. And everybody forgot.
Only
that
this
he was
time,
there.
Everybody in the bar has Parkinson's. That's basically what this comes down to. So the person who actually did the best pushback on this is Washington Post reporter Dan Diamond, an old friend because he's a health reporter.
Okay. Yeah.
And so we've known each other for many years. And he writes in his newsletter, which oddly enough is called Dan Diamond's newsletter, in case you got it mixed up with somebody else's newsletter.
Yeah.
Quick thoughts on the latest Biden health report, some context on the Parkinson's expert who examined the patient. Late Monday night, the White House confirmed that Dr. Kevin Kennard has examined the president for his 3 annual physicals where the doctor ruled out Parkinson's and other serious neurologic disorders.
Well, all right.
The White House has said that those are only visits where Biden has been seen by the neurologist and he's not being treated for Parkinson's. Dr. Kennard's other recent visits were to provide care to other people on campus. And the thing that he points out is, like any reporter, Diamond had questions about Biden's health.
All right.
And it's also true that Kennard is an expert in diseases like Parkinson's.
All right, also.
But I didn't see this detail when other people were reporting it. He's apparently gone to the White House dozens of times dating back to when he became the on-call neurologist over a decade ago. So he went through the White House logs. He was there with the Obama White House. He goes because there's a whole bunch of other things that people have issues with. And if you have a history of migraine, you know this, but there are many people that don't know this. There's this stuff called Botox. You might be familiar with it because it gets rid of wrinkles.
Yes.
Okay.
That's how I know it.
But it's a muscle relaxant. So if, for example, you're a kid with cerebral palsy who has really stiff legs and so on and so forth, you can use Botox injections. A lot of the physical therapists will do that in order to relieve stiffness and pain. So it's used in other things. It's also treatment for migraine. So if he, who is an expert in this, goes to the White House for various and sundry things, there's a host of things he might be treating with a host of people who work there. It's not necessarily every single visit from this guy must be Parkinson's, which is the way it was reported in the press. Not true. Right. Dan Diamond points all of this out and points out the statements, specific statements. He doesn't have Parkinson's. He's not being treated for Parkinson's. It's not Parkinson's. So there's a whole bunch of stuff out there about Parkinson's.
That's, okay. Well, that is interesting. He happens to be an expert in Parkinson's also, but he's not a Parkinson's doctor. He's a neurologist, and there's a lot of things he could be doing. Okay. I get your point, including
Dan
Botox.
Points out the New York Times is still front-paging a story on Biden and Parkinson's based solely on innuendo and now thoroughly debunked by the White House. They actually chose to run the story in the print edition even after the White House denial under a slightly caveated headline, Parkinson's expert visited White House 8 times. Why is unclear. Why is unclear is not a phrase that should appear in a news headline.
No, right. Yeah, but why?
They refused to give it up. They refused to retract the story. It was wrong.
Well, he did go.
So
he is a Parkinson's
expert, reporter and professor, is looking at this and says, I said earlier, the strongest element in media isn't bias. This is all from the Pundit Roundup, by the way. It's narrative.
Which the Pundit Roundup is.
Yeah.
Good.
That's what I've learned from 25 years in this industry. Let me give you a non-political example.
You did the strongest thing. Yes. All right.
Do you remember how journalists handled a major story in 2001?
I don't know. Which one?
Well, what happened in 2001?
The Space Odyssey?
No.
Oh. I don't know.
What else happened in 2000?
9/11.
Yeah, but not that one.
No. I don't know. What are we talking about?
Summer of the Shark.
What?
In early July, an 8-year-old boy was attacked by a shark, and that set off a frenzy in media that didn't abate. Talk about feeding frenzy. That's what sharks have. Until September 11th. I was at Myrtle Beach, and I was in a Myrtle Beach newsroom at the time. We had no shark attacks as far back as we could remember. There were no shark attacks, even though we were attracting several million tourists every year. What was I forced to do as a young journalist? Write about shark attacks. I tried to talk my editor out of it, making the plain argument, shark attacks weren't a thing. She looked at me and said, but everybody's talking about it. That's literally the reason I wrote, because I think I wrote a front page news story about the non-existence of shark attacks. The narrative had to be adhered to, no matter the facts. I did everything I could to add context, put up high in the story. There were no threat of shark attacks on our beaches, even though I thought the entire story was made up and stupid. I've never forgotten that article, even teach about it in my classes. That's how this New York Times story reads, the Parkinson's thing.
Yeah.
I suspect if you asked them to defend it, the writers would point to all the context showing the doctor was unlikely testing treating Biden for Parkinson's. I strongly suspect New York Times article grew out of the New York Post and Guardian stories that were just about what White House visitor log said and no more. It's the most irresponsible kind of journalism, the one with no context or related facts and lots of speculation. And that's the only reason you write a story like that, because others did first, not because it's really a story. And to give it a lot of prominence to boot is doubly irresponsible by the New York Times. But as I said, narrative is the strongest element in media. If other people are talking about it, we have to follow suit or be seen as missing out. I suspect that New York Times tells itself they're simply trying to bring clarity, and that's hogwash. And hogwash would not be the word I would use. You'd have to use that.
Yeah.
word.
Oh, wait, I have it doing it
That's
already.
bullshit.
There you go. See, now
Exactly
you're,
right.
you're off the hook.
When you use prominent space in a news outlet like the Times, it gives the story a kind of weight, importance, seriousness it didn't have before. That was our mistake in 2001 in Myrtle Beach.
Oh.
We were the major news outlet. Our only daily newspaper. Had the Times looked into this and found what it found, nothing, that would have been reasonable. But to give it prominent space even after finding nothing, that's irresponsible. Or at most, put it in the back of the paper and at the bottom of the website.
All
So
right.
that's his
Bottom
point.
of
Somebody
the
read that and
website.
said, I was working at a newsroom during the OJ stuff, and I got
Okay.
out of news and started and moved over to the IT side
Oh.
because I was sick and tired of OJ stories. And the editor said, but that's what people want to hear. That's all they want to hear.
Yeah, I guess. Did you really think I was going to remember the shark attacks
No.
from 2001? No, okay.
No, that's why I thought it was such a good story.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know. What
What's the
happened
point
in
of telling you stuff
2001?
you already know?
The gorilla threw the bone in the air when he found the monolith? I remember that
That
part.
happened in 2001.
Yeah.
Yeah, but not the year 2001. Just
Oh.
in the movie
Oh,
2001.
yeah. I'm like, I don't know, 9/11. That's it. That's all I've got.
But see,
Right.
when I say it happened in 2001, you can't cite me for making a mistake or misleading you. It actually happened in 2001 that a gorilla threw a bone in the air.
It's right. And everyone was talking about it. And
everybody
that's
was
why
talking
we
about
did
it.
the story on it. And it was
Yeah.
front page news. Yeah, I do remember. And of course, we now have Shark Week, which I guess
Yeah, and
did that come
Sharknado and all the other
first?
stuff. And now we have Trump talking about sharks and electric boats.
Yeah, right, exactly. I mean, and people are still talking about it, and it clearly
And it's
worked
all
on Trump.
Isaac Bailey's fault because he wrote a story
Yeah.
about it in the Myrtle Beach Press.
Yeah, but he said it didn't exist, and Trump is still terrified between what Jaws and I guess one shark attack, and then Shark Week maybe is
Yeah.
what does it for people.
He's afraid of batteries.
Yes, right. Well, electricity in general scares the crap out of him. I'm not really sure how that happened, but maybe he's afraid someone will drop a toaster in his bathtub or something. I don't know what it is that drives that, but yeah, I don't know. Shark, I guess that could be right alongside my other weird thesis about people believing in skyrocketing crime rates, despite the fact that crime rates are dropping because 95% of what's on television is crime drama, true crime. Podcasts are the biggest thing ever, and everybody loves these investigative news programs that are about, they're edited documentaries, mini documentaries with dramatic music of tracking, the worst criminals imaginable. And I think the television tells them crime and sharks are running our society. And shark attacks are virtually non-existent and crime is dropping, but doesn't matter. This is what I see on TV. Everybody's talking about it. So, I don't know. That seems pretty odd. Well, we should be talking about how Trump is losing and going to prison on every show, but nobody seems interested for whatever reason. All right. Great. Well, we're nearing the end of today's time, so I think, we've pretty much wrapped it up. So, tomorrow we'll have more. We may do a shortened show tomorrow, but that would include your segment. So for you, it's perfectly fine.
Oh, okay.
But for me, I might have to go at 10 o'clock. We'll have to see. Updates on that later. But you continue as normal.
All right. I'll pretend I didn't even
You can
know
do the
that,
whole
'cause
show.
It doesn't really matter.
Right. You could come in and say, well, I only do half the show, so I'm leaving at 9:30. But
I could.
right.
Thanks for giving me that. It wouldn't occur to me, but now that you mentioned it.
Now that you mention it. Usually around 9:40, though, on a Thursday. You say, it's actually about it. So, all right. Anything else to sneak in? You can give it a shot or drop it in Skype, and we'll read it out to the folks. Anything we missed today? I think we kind of covered a little bit of everything. Sharks.
Those are the major stories.
Okay.
I mean, after all, it's summer.
Yes, that is true.
Remember, quiet summer, not a lot going on.
Yeah. You know who's in for a day? I thought I would share this with you for just a minute. We can't talk about it because you're running out of time, but I thought this was interesting. I saw it come across social media. Nathan Newman has set himself up for quite a day today with a Substack entry, which makes an interesting point. But like I said, he's going to have a hard time today. Biden has saved more Palestinian lives than any other person. This I thought was an interesting take, and the trend among the young peoples who are protesting in support of Palestinians and their plight have taken to insisting that he be known as Genocide Joe. And Nathan Newman, a bona fide leftist in his own right, pointing out now it's certainly true, and he will agree with you. He even approaches the question from the same point of view, and in the first sentence of his piece is that, quote, Israel had clear genocidal intent when they launched their war on Gaza. And so he says so at the outset, but goes on to point out the effort that Biden has been making all along. He's the only one who's had any effect. It hasn't been the effect people wanted. Certainly not the protesters, certainly not the Palestinians, not the total effect that they wanted, but he's been the only person out there effectively able to move the Israelis off of this, as he says, genocidal intent to any extent at all. It's not a success. It hasn't ended the war. It hasn't ended what people are pointing to as genocide, but has it diminished its effects? Yes, apparently, according to Nathan Newman, but what a day he's set up for himself answering his friends and neighbors, I would think. So
anyway, that's it for me.
Thought you might find it
music will start soon, and then
Yes.
the break, and then I'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah, that's the way it works. Thanks very much. Thanks for reminding me of 2001: A Space Odyssey, a Shark Odyssey. Odyssey was out on the ocean, the original Odyssey. There were sharks probably in that. Not much mention of it. But, all right, you've given me plenty to think about. And all of my own thoughts about it are rather foolish. So I think we'll read some articles probably in the second part of the show, and then I'll make foolish comments on that instead. Not just on your own commentary. Well put. Thanks, Greg. We'll see you tomorrow. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. On the way out the door, I was just having a discussion with Greg. So this new soundboard setup and the editing capabilities that it makes possible. Interesting. I have to take a listener poll and take several of them probably along the way and get some feedback. For instance, I was explaining now that we have all the audio on separate tracks, separate channels, whatever. I don't know what the terminology actually is. I've been using channels. But I think that maybe I'm thinking like CB radio channels. I'm in the wrong place here. But with separate tracks, it makes it possible to do various cleanups for the podcast. For instance, our usual interruptions. Cough, sneeze, throat clearing, dogs barking, lawnmowers going, what have you. Makes it easier to edit those things out in the podcast and to do so cleanly versus one single stream of audio. Sure, Abby barks like crazy here, but we talk right over it. And if you try to minimize or get rid of Abby's contribution to the show, the rest of the show suffers. But it occurs to me, as my son pointed out, a lot of this is part of the character of the show. Do you want to edit out when Abby comments on things? Do you want to edit out when the doorbell rings? You clearly don't want to edit it out if the doorbell rings and then you spend 5 minutes saying the doorbell is ringing. What is going on here? But other little things. But what about, sure, we'll say, all right, no more, you can feel free to get rid of coughs and sneezes or throat clearing or whatever. Nobody wants to hear that. And we were doing our best to get rid of that anyway, where it was possible for the podcast. Nothing you can do about the live show. Supposedly, I guess we could rig up some sort of devices, but it's not like the old radio days where they had easy-to-access cough buttons. They're a little more cumbersome on virtual soundboard setups like this. But for instance, ambiance and background noise that are part of or have come to be part of the show. Like if back in the day, back in the middle of the pandemic when everybody was at home, if we could have edited out every time the Coke cans opened in the morning, back in the days when various members of the household production staff were drinking caffeinated beverages in the morning, and in particular Coca-Cola, that kind of became part of the show. Or even just the I'm broadcasting from a diner ambiance of, sometimes doing this work in the kitchen. Do we want that out? Do we want that in? I imagine people want to hear from Abby every once in a while. So just sort of checking in on things. And also, well, there was a specific request. What about the ringy-dingy noise from Skype when Greg calls in? That's sort of an announcement that he's on his way. Of course, we could substitute that for, on a normal radio show, they would say, joining us now on the program, Greg Dworkin, who's a lunatic who lives in Connecticut and occasionally calls in, and we just can't stop him. I don't know what kind of bio we would give him, but normally you say an expert on Parkinson's disease, which means I have Parkinson's disease. So how are you today? Right. We can do our own intro of Greg, but the ringy-dingy noise from Skype has become our trademark of unprofessionalism. And so the question is, do we leave it in or not? So just soliciting some advice from the listeners to see what they are interested in. Let's see. By the way, I just wanted to tip you off to that you should maybe want to swoop in and read this Nathan Newman piece here. I thought Greg would be interested to hear about it, but we didn't have time to read the whole thing before the break came. But why don't we dive into it now and see whether it makes a convincing case for you? Biden has saved more Palestinian lives than any other person. Now, Nathan Newman, I should point out, describes himself this way in the bio he attaches to his Substack, policy/activist/writer, written at The Nation, The Prospect, Dissent, New York Daily News, The Week, etc., etc. Teaches mass incarceration / white-collar crime / research methods at City University, CUNY, in New York. And a personage of note among the netroots for many years, I guess. We could say it that way. And it would be accurate to do so. More accurate than saying that people were getting it's the summer of the shark, for instance. So here's the argument. Biden has saved more Palestinian lives than any other person. In the face of mass slaughter, that may be unsatisfying. And I know that you'd be fair game to say unsatisfying sort of underplays it, for one thing. And, unsatisfying answers are not the answers you're looking for when you are worrying about mass slaughter. You're looking for satisfying answers in all of this. But I don't know. He makes an interesting point here. I don't think it will change minds, certainly not change minds about what's happening on the ground, but it could and should change minds about what you're going to say about the people who are players in this drama. In the face of mass slaughter, that may be unsatisfying, but, quote, Genocide Joe, unquote, is the one who stopped Israeli ethnic cleansing and starvation tactics. That's an important caveat right there, right? Some people are not going to want to hear that, and they're going to say, you said he stopped Israeli ethnic cleansing and starvation? No, he did not. And you're right, he did not. But did he stop certain tactics from being put into place? Yes. Did they come up with other also terrible tactics? Yeah. Maybe less effective tactics at ethnic cleansing and starvation? Maybe. Is that enough? Is that satisfying? No. but is it, in the face of ethnic cleansing and starvation tactics, would you rather allow people to use more effective ones, or would you rather get in the way of the more effective ones and force them onto less effective ones? That, right? If you're being at all pragmatic about it. But as I said, he begins the piece by saying Israel had clear genocidal intent when they launched their war on Gaza. Certainly, certain Israelis did. But at any rate, I'm reading his words here. They shut Gaza's border, they did do that, and barred all food convoys from entering, threatening in early October of 2023 to bomb Egyptian aid convoys. A number of Israeli ministers have called for expelling Palestinians from Gaza wholesale, right? And resettling it with Israelis. A number of Americans have called for that as well. And some of them want to be back in the White House, if they can be. Settling Gaza with Israelis, using ethnic cleansing as a tool to win the war. That this was the plan is not some left-wing conjecture. It's backed by public statements of Israeli ministers. As the Wall Street Journal reported in February, quote, Israeli officials initially signaled they would completely cut off food, water, electricity, and fuel from the Strip to force Hamas to surrender. So, Nathan asks, what stopped them? And they haven't been entirely stopped. They still have mostly cut off food, water, electricity, and fuel from the Strip, but not completely. What stopped the completeness of it? Nathan's answer, Joe Biden. Not the United Nations, not European leaders, not campus protesters, though you have every right to be there. It was Joe Biden who forced the Israelis to abandon the genocidal aspects of their invasion that would have killed orders of magnitude more Palestinians. Doesn't unkill anybody, hasn't prevented them from being killed in tremendous numbers, but it would have been orders of magnitude more, is the argument here. Again, the Wall Street Journal wrote, under pressure from the U.S. and with the humanitarian situation in the Strip worsening, Israel has relented and now says it is trying to get as much aid into Gaza as it can, though the United Nations says aid flowing into the enclave still isn't sufficient, and it certainly isn't, and you could certainly question whether anybody in Israel was really trying to get as much aid into Gaza as it can, or maybe what's your definition of how much can it get in there? Because that'll be important in figuring out whether they're telling the truth or not. Anyway, this overall argument builds on my piece from January, so it kind of has been saying this for some time now. In January, he wrote, The Case for Biden on Gaza, with later stories in the Wall Street Journal and other statements by Israeli officials making it clearer how much Biden frustrated their war plans for even worse atrocities than they have so far committed. It's also clear, as developments have shown, that while people justifiably should ask why Biden didn't do more, the murderous intent of the Israelis and likely actions by Congress would have stopped Biden from taking more dramatic action than he did. This is an interesting argument. And as much as I said it, as much as Nathan Newman is in for a day for himself, maybe we are too. But the Biden campaign for humanitarian aid for Palestinians is examined in the next section. Biden's opposition to Israel's starvation war strategy began immediately after Israel launched its war on Gaza, when Israel attempted to starve out the Palestinians. Within a few weeks, headlines noted that Israel had backed down due to pressure from the Biden administration. The embedded headline here is from Axios and reads, Israel to allow entry of humanitarian aid to Gaza from Egypt after U.S. pressure. Now, this would be followed up with U.S. airdrops of aid into Gaza. Then Biden negotiated the building of a pier to deliver aid by ship. And I know that's widely maligned, and lots of people who have been big voices in support of the Palestinians have been mocking it and saying it was a ridiculous effort, and it failed, generally speaking. But I thought it was interesting that they spent so much time and energy mocking an attempt to do something in the face of complete chaos and idiocy from the Israeli ministries. And did it work? No. Well, airdrops, you can only send so much, and it's a drop in the bucket. Yeah, it is, but it's a drop. I mean, he did the thing. Could more have been done? I don't know. I'm not certain how, in terms of like actually getting aid in, short of fighting the Israeli army and pushing your way in. I don't know. Airdrops and the pier, as ridiculous as it was to be reduced to that, he did at least attempt to try it. Certainly you would have gotten no such attempt from Trump, and probably not from most Republicans. But again, is it the solution that people were looking for? No, it wasn't. But is it fair to take somebody who will try literally anything to get even the smallest amount of aid through and say, oh, well, you're actually Genocide Joe? Well, no, it never really was. But okay. Often lost in the discussion, Nathan continues, over military aid to Israel, which is problematic to be sure, is the fact that the Biden administration requested and received billions of dollars in humanitarian aid for Gaza in the congressional bill passed by Congress in April. The focus by Biden on humanitarian aid for Palestinians has not gone uncommented on by Israeli leaders. Super idiots like Itamar Ben-Gvir, for instance. I added that commentary, but Ben-Gvir said Israel's national security minister, of course, has denounced Biden. Instead of giving us his full backing, Biden is busy with giving humanitarian aid and fuel to Gaza, which goes to Hamas. That's his claim. So, the people who are actually in charge of running the program that gets labeled genocide are saying, actually, Joe Biden has been a huge hindrance to us and is not helping us at all in our policy, as opposed to here in the United States where the protesters say, no, he's doing the genocide. He loves the genocide. Well, next section examines Biden's opposition to ethnic cleansing in Gaza. Israel early on had made clear that part of the point of the bombing campaign and working to starve Gaza was to force voluntary migration to other countries, a polite word for ethnic cleansing and a repeat, as he says, of the Nakba of 1948. Common belief among Palestinians and their supporters, and plenty of evidence for it, I suppose. Israeli media on Monday said Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, here's a quote from, where are they taking this from? Oh, well, okay, the link is there, but the quote, block quote here, Israeli media on Monday said Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is pushing for plans to implement, quote, voluntary migration on the Palestinians in Gaza to other countries. According to the Israel Hayom Daily, Netanyahu made the comment during a closed-door parliamentary session for his ruling Likud party lawmakers. Our problem is the countries that are willing to absorb them, and we are working on it, he reportedly said. The problem referred to in the last line is that Biden has worked publicly with other countries in the region like Jordan and Egypt to make clear that Israel's plan for ethnic cleansing would not be allowed, and they would not facilitate the expulsion of Palestinians to surrounding countries. Some more embedded headlines here from Jerusalem Post, Bloomberg, and I don't know what this one is. I don't recognize the logo. But Palestinians mustn't be forced out of Gaza. Biden and King Abdullah warn. Biden and Sisi agree Gazans shouldn't be displaced to Egypt. Saudi Arabia condemns Israel's minister's call for migrations of Palestinians in Gaza. Back to the narrative here. Biden has reinforced this opposition to ethnic cleansing by pushing hard for reviving a two-state solution that would bring Palestinian sovereignty to the West Bank and Gaza following the end of the conflict. Notably, the Palestinian Authority has endorsed Biden's plan for a pathway to democratic reforms and the restoration of Palestinian Authority control of a united West Bank and Gaza, which is, of course, in the interest of the Palestinian Authority, to be sure, and unlikely to happen anytime real soon, but okay. There it is as a part of the wish list. The media has repeatedly reported repeated conflict between Biden and Netanyahu over Biden's demands that Israel restore funds designated for the Palestinian Authority so there can be a functioning Palestinian government for the territories. Next section, Israelis are clear about how Trump's policies would have differed from Biden, in case anybody still has questions about that. Ben Gvir and other Israelis have made clear that they believe Donald Trump would have given him a free hand to starve out the Palestinians. Donald Trump has said as much. Here, another quote. Ben Gvir also said he thought the Biden administration was hampering Israel's war effort and said he believed Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump would have given Israel a freer hand to quash Hamas. If Trump was in power, the U.S. conduct would be completely different. That's the quote. Trump has just reinforced that view, since his major complaint about Israel's war is that they were taking too long to, quote, finish what they started, unquote, and has promised to wipe out and deport the pro-Palestinian protesters in the U.S. Quote, again, we're going to set that movement back 25 or 30 years in a promise to donors. In the recent debate, he criticized Biden's support of humanitarian aid and stopping Israel from being able to finish the job, saying Biden had become like a Palestinian. Trump has used pretty much the same language advocating for quick ends to the wars in both Ukraine and Gaza, meaning in both cases surrender by those invaded and permanent occupation by the invaders. His vision for the future of Gaza is no doubt reflected in his comments by his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who was his main envoy to the Middle East during his presidency, who praised Gaza as valuable waterfront property that Israel should develop after they expel Palestinian civilians, ideally to Egypt. The difference between a President Biden repeatedly opposing Israel's starvation and ethnic cleansing goals versus a Trump presidency that would endorse them in the name of finishing the job could not be starker. Now, that point's been made 100 times and it just hasn't sunk in. Maybe it just never will. Maybe it can't. They just don't want it to. Why couldn't Biden do more is a good question and is addressed next, with Gaza's Ministry of Health estimating that more than 38,000 Palestinians have been killed since Israel launched its military offensive on October 7th. And really, I guess they launched their offensive on October 8th, maybe. But it is still reasonable to ask why Biden didn't do even more to reduce Palestinian deaths, including cutting off military aid to stop the invasion altogether. First, Israel doesn't need either U.S. aid or U.S. weapons, which I guess should make it easier to stop. But okay, Israel is now a wealthy nation with an annual GDP of $525 billion. So a few $1 billion in aid from the U.S., while politically appreciated, doesn't actually matter for whether they can afford to conduct a war. Again, I don't see why that isn't answered with, okay, good. Let them go. Then we can't say, oh my gosh, we're hurting our allies so badly by withholding the aid. But there's still the political damage that would be done. And Israel now has a large internal arms industry of its own and has received arms shipments during the current war from multiple nations, including India and Germany. So Israel doesn't need U.S. weapons to conduct its war. Maybe not the greatest point, but a point nonetheless. The U.S. aid may be appreciated and has given Biden negotiating leverage in areas where Israeli political opinion is divided, such as on humanitarian aid and expulsions of Palestinians from Gaza, but not enough leverage to stop the war altogether. Netanyahu couldn't politically afford to blow off aid from the U.S. over conditions that a majority of the Israeli voters would consider reasonable, but could have easily ignored conditions such as ending the war altogether, where Israeli public opinion solidly supports the effort. Even if Biden wanted to end weapons delivery to Israel just for symbolic reasons, the power of AIPAC and the general Israel lobby in D.C. means that would be impossible. Only 37 Democrats voted against the Israeli aid package in November, and only 8 Democrats voted against the Iron Dome funding bill in 2021. If Biden tried to block military aid to Israel altogether, there would clearly be veto-proof majorities to force through delivery of weapons aids with no conditions. AIPAC's ability to defeat Jamal Bowman in his recent primary, questionable in itself, for daring to vote against the Israeli military aid will no doubt just further discipline U.S. elected leaders to fall in line with the Israeli lobby demands. And at least that, I think, is defensible, right? In the sense that maybe it's true that Jamal Bowman was his own undoing, but maybe it's still the case that it will be considered as a threat. And it is a threat. It's a real threat to have that much money spent against you or to be targeted that way. Now, you can survive it if you're good and you get a couple of lucky breaks, but not everybody can. So, there'll be a certain amount of trepidation, no doubt. So Biden was operating within a relatively narrow window of political maneuvering, both within Israeli public opinion and within public opinions here at home. Political options, rather, he says, here at home. Biden, it says next in the next heading here, stopped genocide in Gaza, which matters with the threat of Trump on the ballot. How so? 40,000 Palestinians dying out of a Gazan Strip population of 2.1 million is a horrific number of deaths, almost 2% of their population, and likely more if you include indirect deaths. But while these are the numbers for a horrific war, one involving multiple war crimes, it is said here, by the Israeli government, these numbers are comparable to the roughly 3.7% of the global population that died in World War II. Not really a great point, but okay. Or the 2.2% of the Syrian population killed in its recent civil war, or as many as 8.5% of the Tigray population killed in the recent war by the Ethiopian government there. But genocide is 69% of German Jews and 90% of Polish Jews killed in the Holocaust. The 75% of the Tutsi population killed in Rwanda in 1994. The 25% even of the Cambodian population killed by Khmer Rouge, or the nearly 25% of East Timor residents killed by Indonesia after its 1975 invasion. I don't usually like to engage in rhetorical fights over words, but the use of the word genocide by some sectarian groups is being used in bad faith. They are using the word to obscure the difference between the result of Biden's actual policies working to reduce deaths in Gaza versus the potential real genocide that would occur if Netanyahu had his way and if Trump wins office again and allows it. That makes the misuse of the word genocide now incredibly dangerous. While the International Criminal Court has justifiably found war crimes committed by the Israeli government as well as by Hamas, it has so far refused to deem the war in Gaza to be a genocide, in fact, approving German shipments of weapons to Israel as not violating the UN Genocide Convention. What Biden has accomplished since October is to prevent Israel from implementing either mass starvation or ethnic cleansing as tools of war, both of which would have constituted a form of genocide. That he did not prevent a brutal war may be unsatisfying, but preventing deaths orders of magnitude larger and preserving the Palestinians as a people within their own borders is a real accomplishment. Some liberals say they are supporting Biden despite his policies on Gaza, but I fully believe that pro-Palestinian progressives should be supporting Biden because of his policies on Gaza. That'll get him a day's worth of discussion, at a minimum. Anyway, I believe, as he says, that pro-Palestinian progressives should be supporting Biden because of his policies on Gaza, as obtaining probably the best results a U.S. president could have achieved given the genocidal intent of the Netanyahu Israeli regime and the political limits set by the AIPAC and Israel lobby here at home. And given Trump's clear intention to accommodate those genocidal Israeli intentions, the choice of Biden in November is even clearer for those who care about the Palestinian cause. How do you like that? Something to think about. No endorsement, just because it was read here on the air. An interesting idea, although, okay. Maybe an endorsement of how interesting the idea is. And I'd be interested to see what Nathan's day is like and the next week or so. And, well, there you have it. I just wanted to put that on the record. I think probably among listeners of the show, as even those who are explicitly pro-Palestinian in their bent and who have been critical of Biden's response, probably at bottom will acknowledge, certainly almost all, I can't imagine anybody continuing to listen to the show who is unable and unwilling to acknowledge that Trump would be worse. Yes, but this is an interesting approach to, well, maybe you ought to be affirmatively saying Biden actually has done something worth doing here. It's something to consider. And now you're able to consider it. I thought I would bring it to your attention. Time for us to take a break. Probably a good time for us to get the hell out of here and take 2 minutes to regroup and then return to domestic politics, where our basis and understanding is a little bit better and a little bit more grounded. So that's what we'll have in store for you after this, and lots of our usual commentators to bring you back to that familiar area and those familiar commentators that we have discussed in the past, including still more on the understanding, the expanding understanding and awareness of Project 2025. That has to be shared. There's a new angle on that. And, well, a couple other things that have been sitting idly in pocket for the time being. And with an abbreviated show tomorrow, I guess possibly, all the more important that we fit them in today.
Sup fam, it's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Guess what? Our first responses are in. This just in, by which I mean it came in half an hour ago, and I was too busy reading you Nathan Newman's piece to notice. But Christine on 16 weighs in, so now you all need to weigh in. Do not edit household background noises. Okay, that's the header. Do not edit household background noises altogether out under any circumstances. It's part of the charm of the show. So there you go. All of you will continue to hear. I've always wondered about this. Like, is it adding anything to... there's nothing I could do about some of the sound. And I don't know that I'd be able to edit out the household noises, really. The ones that are happening behind me are just going to be on my track. They would be editable if they happen while I'm not talking and Greg is talking. Or I'm just sitting in silence. We could practice some of that now. Like, if I were just sitting here saying... okay, I can't really stand that much silence. But yeah, I guess if I wasn't talking, but my mic was open and Greg was talking, and you are hearing morning yogurt being consumed from a bowl and the clanking of, whether it be oatmeal or yogurt, the clanking of the spoon against the bowl, which I like to say I'm broadcasting from a Midwestern diner where I have the finger on the pulse of all one other person who's here with me. But, you know, things like that. And it has kind of become the charm, part of the charm of the show. The doorbell stuff I could do without, but then I talk about, oh no, the doorbell is ringing and how stressful that is. That's part, maybe. Anyway, we'll see what we can do. And maybe the loudest of the loud noises, but the pleasant beeping of the washing machine in the background, that we can get rid of. I do try to cut down on the just an annoying background hum of things. Turn off fans or whatever appliances might be humming in the near background. But okay, that's one vote, and right now that's with 100% of the vote that I expect actually to come in reporting. It is do not edit out background noises under any circumstances. So take that under advisement, editing department. Although I have to tell you that the editing department is trying mightily to listen to as little of the show as possible. And to the extent that they're looking for sound anomalies that need editing out, they are scrubbing in 4x time through the show, and what they hear from us is, and then they occasionally stop when they see a spike in something, and they hear certain snippets of the show. And the word from let's say early Gen Z on the show is cringeworthy. We do not like it. So there you have it. I think he took particular offense in the way young people do when oldsters like us use what they believe is their terminology to my reference. Yeah, what was it? Right. He did hear this part of it. Occasionally, he slows down and hears the show, and he was cringing at hearing Greg asking me, had I seen the debate yet? And I was saying, no, I still haven't. And then saying, I can't be worried that Biden needs to drop out based on his performance in the debate if I don't watch the debate. And then reference the man pointing to temple meme. And he was like, oh my God, please don't talk about any online memes. But that's old, right? Old people should know about that one. It's been around for, 10 years. I don't know. Maybe it's less than 10 years. Anyway, apparently that's very bothersome to the editing department, or what has become newly expanded into the editing department, but was researching for us before. But now he gets to hear more of the show, which is disastrous, apparently, in his estimation. But anyway, okay, one vote in. I'll try and keep an eye out for more votes being registered in email or social media. But now, time to turn to another subject. Here's our friend Asparagus Zucchini, who via Mastodon lets us know about the subject we were discussing an hour ago. Why didn't I see it then? When we were talking to Greg about Biden and is he in, is he out, what's going to happen? And he asks, isn't it straightforward? I don't know. Would you say straightforward? Let's hear. Isn't it straightforward for Biden to keep the ballot as is, the ticket, I guess, but promise to turn over, responsibilities, presidential responsibilities to Harris just after inauguration? Well, that's one approach to it, certainly. And it would be relatively straightforward in the sense that it would be understood all along that Harris would succeed Biden if necessary. I don't know if you want to plan, well, we're going to go all the way right up through inauguration and then just not be president. I don't know how well that would be received, but certainly the idea, even if you just tweak it a little bit and say, well, look, isn't it straightforward to say the ticket is what it is, and should it become necessary that should it become the case that I literally cannot function in the job, Vice President Harris will be there to step in. But we've already understood that all along, so that would make it rather straightforward. But it seems like a delicate situation, and I don't know what the effect would be of saying I'm running for president, but I'm not going to do it. That's my plan now. Yeah, we might want to tweak that one a little bit, but it would certainly be straightforward in the sense that our friend Asparagus Zucchini, who I forget whether he wants us using his real name or not these days, but it is immediately available on his Mastodon display, but because I can't remember, and I could look it up in email, we have an answer. But at any rate, Asparagus Zucchini, which is how you all know him, I guess. It would be at least more straightforward to say, okay, we have a plan in place, and you know who the successor is going to be, and there's no reason not to stick with that plan. It was good enough for 2020. The voters said, yes, I'll take Joe Biden with the backup of Kamala Harris should something happen. That's what the law says we would do in the case of a problem, and we're for continuity in the constitutional order. It's the other party that wants to stand that stuff on its head. We're against that. Boom. Done. I see what you mean. Okay. Now, on to other subjects. As I mentioned and have mentioned over and over again, everyone is, it's all eyes on Project 2025, unless your eyes are elsewhere, like polling or Israel or any of the other things that we've been looking at. Or, for instance, MAGA candidates saying, some folks just need killing. And by the way, let's put the 10 Commandments in every classroom. Thou shalt not listen to what we put in every classroom, damn it, because some people just need it. Anyway, 2025. Or rather, Project 2025, back in the news, back in the analysis, and who better to turn to put this in front of our eyes again than Amanda Marcotte, who brings us a new angle on it, which is why we read her, the grift behind Project 2025. Aha. And, of course, leader John McEntee, remember him? The guy who was like Trump's caddy and then became his body man and then became director of White House personnel somehow and has been spending his time saying that he likes to hand out counterfeit bills to homeless people on the theory that they'll then be arrested when they try to use them in the store. And we wondered, for instance, why isn't he being arrested for passing out counterfeit currency? By the way, someone should look into that. He's very close to Donald Trump and threatens to come back in a very prominent position should Trump return to the White House by whatever means. And in the meantime, now that he's running for president, Trump has Secret Service protection, of course, and would have had it anyway as a former president. And one might wonder, counterfeiting and anti-counterfeiting efforts and law enforcement being the province of the Secret Service, granted another division of the Secret Service, but you might wonder, why is somebody who claims in a widely distributed social media video to be a counterfeiter or to be part of a counterfeiting distribution operation in some capacity, allowed to get so close to the president? And, well, why aren't you doing anything about it? Well, it's not like counterfeiters are walking up to Secret Service agents and presenting themselves as counterfeiters. If they did, we would arrest them. But, well, now he is. So what's the story? One might well want to ask a question, let's say, of the press office of the Secret Service about that. Anyway, not what Amanda Marcotte is doing. She's focusing on Johnny McEntee as a jerk ass, and that's well deserved. Leader John McEntee made an app, she's reporting here, this is of interest to her, to hustle cash from lonely MAGA men. Basically, she had been sending this out on social media with the comment that not only is Project 2025 terrifying, of course, but that the people behind it are also weird, just genuinely weird people. And then says, meet John McEntee, who ran personnel for Trump's White House. He also runs a shady, quote, dating app for lonely MAGA men. The marketing for the app is more pathetic than you're imagining. And now we get to really put it to the test. What are you imagining? Let's find out if it's more pathetic than that. Donald Trump, Amanda tells us, wants the press and the voters to look away from Project 2025. Instead, his defensiveness is causing journalists to report on the intricate web of connections between Trump and the far-right playbook for his desired second term. For instance, one of the many close Trump advisors who now works on Project 2025 is John McEntee, former Trump White House personnel director. McEntee has already confirmed that the plan is to, quote, integrate Project 2025 into the official Trump campaign. When McEntee isn't scheming for ways to purge the federal government of reality-based bureaucrats and replace them with MAGA loyalists, he's busy separating foolish MAGA men from their money, which I can support, with a dating app called The Right Stuff, which he should probably get sued for. The app, which was funded initially by far-right tech investor Peter Thiel, who's a weirdo and a vampire, purports to connect Republican singles looking for love. In truth, it's not clear what the app does, though many users express concerns about the data it may be collecting. One thing it seems that seems unlikely is that it's a sincere effort to get its Republican users to the wedding altar. For one thing, while it's exclusively for heterosexual people, of course, because Republicans, the app seems to suffer a dearth of female users. So that's kind of tough. 2 Republican staffers in Washington, D.C. said many young conservative women have ignored, this says McEnany's, but it's McEntee we're talking about, McEntee's outreach, and have instead jeeringly passed around screenshots of, of her messages to the group chats. Here we're talking about, we've missed an introduction here. There's some editing issues. But John McEntee's running the thing, but maybe he's enlisted the help of, what's her name, McEnany's help. Now I can't remember her first name. And it would have, I'm sure it appeared in the article earlier, in an earlier draft, Kayleigh McEnany. There's a lot of Macs running around in this. But I guess Kayleigh McEnany, blonde-haired Fox News type person who was the former White House press secretary, I guess has signed on in an effort to help boost this stupid thing being run by John McEntee. So, 2 Republican staffers in Washington, D.C. have said many young conservative women ignored Kayleigh McEnany's outreach and have instead jeeringly passed around screenshots of her messages to group chats. Zachary Petrizzo of the Daily Beast reported in 2022 about the right stuff. The problem doesn't seem to have abated. As one college Republican recently complained to a right-wing student website, and why not complain to them, women on the app are eligible for a free premium subscription, which goes to show how few women sign up in the first place. He complained it's a commercial failure, even though conservative men, in his estimation, don't do any better with the ladies on mainstream dating apps. Gee whiz, I wonder why. Other users report being deluged with spam after signing up, especially from sex websites. Well, that's what they're after anyway, so why not? It's good targeting. The strangest red flag may be in the primary way McEntee markets the website, with videos selling the fantasy of being a man on a date with a woman who cannot wait to hear your most despicable opinions. As Tim Miller of The Bulwark explained, the conceit of the videos, which are shared widely on Instagram and TikTok, is McEntee, I guess starring in the videos, is on a date, and the point of view is you and the camera are on the date with him. So the audience takes the role of the rapt woman listening to McEntee's conspiracy theories about false flags. Boy, won't that be exciting. Or you're positioned as an adoring lady silently soaking in McEntee's rant, accusing drag queens of being pedophiles while he houses a hamburger. What a great date. McEntee often makes these opinions as shocking as he can so that the videos get outraged reaction and press. In May, for example, he made a video claiming he gives, there it is, homeless people fake money so they'll be arrested if they try to spend it. It's unlikely to be true since the Secret Service tends to go after the person distributing counterfeit money and not the victims who mistakenly take it, but it worked to get people talking about his feed, attracting more attention and perhaps more gullible men downloading the app. I don't know. We'll see. One thing this marketing campaign almost certainly is not about: attracting female users to the right stuff. Even for conservative women, it's not exactly the dream date scenario to sit there in silence while some dude unloads his cruelest and dumbest ideas. No, this appears to be a fantasy for MAGA men. The dream is a woman who will do that for you. And if you can't have that in reality, then you can watch these videos and pretend to be the guy on a date bleating nonsense while a woman listens. Well, they have sex phone lines for that, I suppose. McEntee appears to be yet another one of the seemingly endless stream of masculinity influencers who have created a perfect grift cycle for themselves. First, identify alienated men and promise them a path out of loneliness and into the heterosexual relationship of their dreams. Second, encourage these men to adopt even more repugnant behaviors, that make it even harder for them to attract women, and then, when those men become even more frustrated, push them further to the right, blaming all their problems on feminists, liberals, and LGBTQ people. It's a shtick we've seen from Jordan Peterson to Andrew Tate to the Proud Boys. I call it, that is Amanda Marcotte, calls it the male insecurity to fascism pipeline. It's a good explainer for it. And from a purely sociopathic viewpoint, it's evil genius. Marketing toxic masculinity as self-help benefits both the authoritarian cause and the influencer pocketbooks. MAGA figureheads get to tear down liberal society and make money doing so. They simply don't care that in the process they aren't just hurting most Americans. They're doing real damage to the men who follow them by encouraging them to adopt attitudes and behaviors that will make life harder in every arena, from work to romance. McEntee's goals of running a dating app and gutting American democracy? Two different goals, right? They might seem at first blush to be disparate interests, but they're tightly entwined. The policy agenda of Project 2025 couldn't be better designed to tear further into the already fraying social fabric of America. So many of their goals, from gutting public education to decimating reproductive health care access, will put more stress on communities and families. If Trump wins or takes power in any certain way, their platform will make it harder for people to maintain social relationships, much less create new ones. Try dating without birth control, for instance, or having children without access to schools, or having a safe community without environmental protections, or having a decent job without labor protections. Even if they achieve half of what they wish, the people behind Project 2025 will leave behind an American populace that is lonelier, more alienated, and angrier. But hey, why should John McEntee care? A meaner and more isolated public just means more lonesome men to exploit with his shady dating app. That helps explain some of the connection between those two. It's not immediately obvious. So, okay. Let's see. What else do we need to look at here? Oh, did we not see this one already? I thought we read this one yesterday. Yeah, we did. Okay, this was the Hugo Lowell piece in The Guardian about Trump's plans to block hearings in his January 6th case. I don't know why that hasn't been archived. Let's get rid of that one. We've already done that one. There's, well, let's see, any number of additional directions. I'm gonna spin the wheel here and see which of the longer form stories we haven't gotten to might be of some interest. I mentioned to you, I didn't get all the way through the story on judicial sortition yesterday, but I think we got the basics of it out, and it was an interesting read and give you something to think about. Let's see, there's a couple of shorter stories and then some longer things that might pay to spend some time on. How about this one? There's a couple of, maybe we'll do a couple of shorter ones. This was an interesting piece from not that long ago, I think end of last week. I think Marcy Wheeler was passing around on her own recommendation from the Daily Beast, which I think means we will have, do we have access to the whole story? No, we'll have to read it in pocket, but let's reload it and just make sure we get the byline correct here. Michael Daly, I turned my insurrectionist dad, it says, in for his January 6th activities. But I turned in my insurrectionist dad. How can Trump be immune? That's an interesting question and an interesting take on the immunity ruling from the other day. We've all raged at it, and justifiably so, but this is a new angle. Jackson Reffitt is who we're talking about here. He could not believe what he was hearing. Today? Wow, are you serious? What's he talking about? Reffitt, 21 years old and of Wylie, Texas, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, W-Y-L-I-E, has just been told by the Daily Beast that the U.S. Supreme Court had ruled that the president is largely immune from prosecution, a new power that may include absolving Donald Trump's incitement of those who stormed the Capitol on January 6th. Among the insurrectionists was Jackson's father, Guy, who was sentenced to 81 months in federal prison for his actions that day. Jackson was the one who alerted the FBI to his father's activities and testified against him in one of the first January 6th trials. But in his view, the person most to blame for the riot was Trump himself. My dad ran up the Capitol steps under Trump flags, Reffitt told the Daily Beast. If Trump was not involved, my father would never have been there. He would never have heard that language to incite him to really think that he's doing something good, that he's going to protect the country, that he's going to fight for it. He continued, my dad was out listening to Trump's speech right before going up to the Capitol, and all my dad was saying is, once he's done talking, we're going right to that Capitol. Without Trump's language that day, I doubt he would have had the energy or motive to do that. Reffitt is certain that Trump deliberately roused his father and the others into what followed. I mean, I think we all are. They're not. But, all right, he was using that sort of language to incite, to scare, to fearmonger, and to get people really active in a very dangerous way, he said, which, for people like my dad that fell down the rabbit hole, it really, really dug into his mind, into thinking of himself as a martyr, thinking of himself as someone that needs to do this to save his family, when in reality, Trump just used them. Reffitt added, Trump went home and my dad was arrested 20 days later. Jackson's mother stood by his father, regularly attending a vigil at J6 Corner outside the D.C. jail, singing the national anthem along with the supposed political prisoners inside every night. She even talked to Trump once when he called the group. My mom is like the last person I expected to fall down that rabbit hole of falling in line to support a single individual rather than ideals, which is what my parents fell into very, very hard in supporting this person without care of what happens. Jackson said, it's very, very, very dangerous. 3 verys in that. His 2 sisters were caught in the middle. Trump destroyed my whole family, Reffitt said. Oh, pro-family. What happened to that? Without Trump, my family would still be together. I 100% guarantee you. It was not he says it was. It was a perfect family. How do you like that? It was a perfect family until 2016 and onwards. It spiraled and polarized and it splintered. It was all due to the president. Reffitt noted that when his father was sentenced, his younger sister, Peyton, then 17, told reporters outside the courthouse, Trump deserves life in prison if my father is in prison for this long. Jackson said of his father, he's a martyr for someone that used him. Prosecutors in Washington, D.C. and Georgia secured indictments last year in an effort to make Trump accountable for his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. But now the conservative majority of the Supreme Court has changed the rule of law into the law of rulers. Disgusting, Reffitt said, adding, it's scary that Trump is getting away with it. Jackson feels certain that his father, along with his mother and the rest of the January 6th crowd, applauded the highest court's lowly decision. I'm sure they're happy to know that the person that they follow, the person they support and they fought for, is going to be able to walk free and do it again if he likes, Jackson said. And how sad is that? That's true. And it's going to make things very difficult, naturally, but not only on the national level as we try and grapple with the constitutional aspects of this, but yes, on the ground, inside families that have been torn apart by Trump and his craziness. So, yeah, on a higher level, I was giving some thought to this the other day, and I know that there will be defenders, obviously, but they're clearly wrong. But I was just thinking, as now, the thin reed that the court clings to here, and that defenders of the Trump v. U.S. decision cling to, is that there still are some things for which they would allow presidents to be tried. Well, the unofficial activities. It's just a question of what is unofficial and what isn't. And by the way, if you decide that somebody's activity is unofficial and you will charge them with it, if they are Republicans, we will reverse you and say, no, it was official. If they are Democrats, we will say, you got it right. This is unofficial and you can go ahead with the prosecution. But it does make it awfully difficult, and it does pose problems for other parts of the Constitution as well. I was just sort of beginning to wonder, so if you really did want to give essentially blanket immunity to Donald Trump or some other Republican president, I was just thinking of the two impeachments that we went through, and the claims that were made by Republicans at the time, keeping in mind that people like Mitch McConnell and others were saying, well, what he's done is wrong and he deserves to be held accountable for it, but impeachment is the wrong tool for various reasons, including that really he should be facing criminal liability for the subject of his second impeachment, the insurrection. When in fact it turns out that now the Supreme Court says, well, maybe not, probably not. In fact, maybe he shouldn't be facing criminal liability for anything at all, ever. And not only that, but the nature of the law is such that Republican activists and Supreme Court justices and legal thinkers think that was always the case. And in fact, many of the Republican senators may have been aware at the time they were saying it, that the state of the law really is that no, the president will be immune from prosecution for these things too. For instance, there's some more interplay between that immunity doctrine that was just invented and the impeachment clauses of the Constitution. If you can only be impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors rather than whatever the House of Representatives says on any given day, Republicans were clinging to that. It has to be a high crime or misdemeanor in order to go ahead and move impeachment. Well, if a president is almost always going to be immune from prosecution for those high crimes and misdemeanors, when will you ever be able to convince a Republican, anyway, that there's been a high crime or misdemeanor? They will, of course, immediately misconstrue the idea of immunity from prosecution for the impossibility of criminal activity. Well, you can't charge him for it, therefore there's no crime. Well, there is crime, you just can't hold him accountable in court. It actually makes the impeachment clause all the more important, but they will use it instead to erase it from the Constitution next time it becomes necessary.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Something to think about, but if you want something different to think about, or you don't want to do any thinking and you want to let Justice Putnam do the thinking for you for the next hour, relax, go ahead, it's okay. He does good thinking, I promise you. The West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy comes up next. For instance, what's at the top of the post today? Ted Lieu raised the issue of Donald Trump's awful past at a press conference, but will it make a sound?